What's up, everybody? I'm the Drink Pro, and today we're reviewing Batch 2 of Redbreast 27. What's up, everybody? Kyle the Drink Pro here with you yet again, and yes, you might notice that I'm wearing headphones, doing something a little bit different because I am in the process of moving house. We just recently bought a house, Yolanda and I, very excited about it, and you will get a lot more information about that house as the moving process continues. But it also means that sometimes I leave my equipment at the wrong location and I have to use headphones instead. But not to worry, the mic on these is good enough for making a video, and I'm really excited about today's product, Redbreast 27 Batch 2. Now, I want to be clear, it's Batch 2 because the batch products are done in different ways, and so we need to make sure that you know what you're drinking. If you watch this review and you get Batch 1, you're like, hey, what the hell, Kyle? You said this was going to be these notes, and it's actually those notes. I want you to know you can rely on what I'm telling you, at least to some extent. The first records we have of Redbreast as a brand were in 1912 from the Ghiblis company using John Jameson distillate. Now, the branding Redbreast itself was probably actually added later, and the same product was put in the bottles based on a precursor liquor named JJ's Liquor, John Jameson's. That was a 12-year-old whiskey, which is still a common piece of the lineup for Redbreast. The name Redbreast probably comes from the chairman of Ghiblis, who was an avid bird fan, and so he wanted to name the product after a bird. It got the nickname that JJ's Liquor did, and it stuck so much they started using Redbreast in the branding. Irish whiskey is run through a pot still 3 different times, and that's actually to extract more alcohol out of the grain. And this actually dates back all the way to 1785, when a tax was placed on malted barley. To avoid paying those taxes, Irish whiskey makers started using both malted and unmalted barley to lower their tax incidence. The only way to get enough alcohol out of those products, though, is then to distill it more than once. Pure malt whiskey you can distill once and still get enough to make a whiskey, but you can't do that when you start adding in unmalted barley. The unmalted barley continues to be an element in modern Irish whiskey, and that is part of why there is a grassy note that can sometimes show up in your Irish whiskey products. But enough about the history of Irish whiskey and the development of this brand. Let's talk about Redbreast 27 Batch 2. Like I said, I'm really excited to try this product because it's a 27-year-old whiskey. It's not very often that I get to review a whiskey that's that old. It's 53.5% alcohol also, which is something you don't see a lot of, at least I don't see a lot of in Irish whiskey, but it's becoming more common to do cask strength releases for a lot of people. I think because whiskey is becoming so mainstream and people are demanding higher proof products, there's finally starting to be more of those show up on the market. Now, the Redbreast 27 is actually a blend of whiskeys that were aged in ex-bourbon, ex-port, and ex-sherry casks. But on the label itself, it says enriched with ruby port, which I thought was a really interesting note. Ruby port is actually a fortified wine. It can usually be aged between somewhere in 3 and 6 year time frame. It's relatively inexpensive. It's a relatively simple port product on average. Obviously, there are, different price points for any product that you can get as extreme as you want to on cheap or expensive ends. But the ruby port is not known as a particularly rare or unique port. Nonetheless, it's known for being fresh and not terribly complex, which I actually think is a good move in this case. Because we have 27 years on oak for this whiskey, it's using 3 different kinds of barrels for aging the whiskey and then blending them together. Whatever this enriched with ruby port component is, I really am glad that they're not adding something too complex. There's so much complexity already in the process that adding complexity on top at the end might be overloading it. I'm gonna go ahead and pour this out, and I want to thank Akeem the Dream for providing me with this sample. Akeem is a longtime viewer, fan of the show, and he's a member of my Patreon. So if you want to help make this show and you like bonus content, which there's plenty of on the Patreon site, check me out, patreon.com/thedrinkpro. You may even have the opportunity to win some free stuff. Now, on the nose, the first thing you smell right out of the bottle like that is definitely the grassiness. It shows up for sure. But it quickly dissipates and gets very citrusy and very tropical, I must say. I mean, I get guava on this pretty prominently. And some pineapple, some peaches as well. It's just incredibly fruity. It's a lovely nose. There's also some sharp citrus notes in the back. Definitely some lemon. The grain sort of takes a back seat, but it's definitely there. This grain, grass forward note that I mentioned is a result of using unmalted barley in the process. Although they mention this sort of port fortification, I don't really get any wine notes, but I do get sort of a raspberry. There's an underlying berry component in this for sure. There's just so much going on in this pour. I'm getting a hint of clover, honey, a hint of butterscotch. I mentioned the grain, but there's a slight herbal note as well. Maybe just a touch of anise or maybe some ginger. Although those are very, very subtle notes. Again, the predominant note on this is definitely those fruity tropical notes. This is my first pour of the day. I will say I have tried this pour before, but it was after several other pours. And once you've sort of developed your nose and your palate and gotten them awoken to the whiskey and get them used to those standard whiskey notes, you're gonna come to this and it's going to hit you in the face with fruit. I am definitely getting the fruit right now, but the grassiness is showing up a lot more than I remember. I think that's because this is the first thing I've smelled and the first thing I've drank for the day. Before I taste this, please consider subscribing to my channel, clicking the bell for notifications. It helps me out immensely, and we're really close to 1,000 subscribers. And once I get to 1,000 subscribers, I will be giving away a bottle of whiskey. So please tune in, please click that subscribe button. It'll help me out. Cheers. Now on the first taste, and keep in mind, I didn't let this breathe at all. I'm getting a really distinct grain-forward note on the front of the palate, almost like it's like a cereal note, like a malty cereal. And then in the finish, there's this beautiful nuttiness. I guess I would say it's like hazelnuts and walnuts and maybe a hint of like dark chocolate. A lot going on in the palate, which is funny, again, because when I tasted this after a couple of other pours, I didn't get any of those notes. I just got fruit. Let's see if I continue to drink this, I start to get more and more fruit. I bet I will. Yeah, second taste, front of the palate, definitely starting to get some of that red berry note. This is a wonderfully complex pour, lots of sweet honey throughout. This is definitely a pour that I would let breathe for a while. And matter of fact, I think I am going to pause this recording and come back after letting the whiskey breathe. There's an old saying that you should let a whiskey breathe for a minute for every year it was on oak. Now this is 27 years old, obviously, so 27 minutes. I've let it breathe for maybe 10 or 12 now, so I'm gonna take a 15-minute break. I'm gonna come back and we'll revisit this. It'll just be a seamless transition for you, but for me, it'll be a little bit more choppy. We're gonna see if those fruity notes start to show up more, because right now it's very grassy, it's very grain forward, and that's not what I expect, and that's not what I remember from trying it the first time. So I suspect that being put into this tiny little glass container condensed some of the smell and the flavor in a way that isn't helping the whiskey. So here we go. I'm gonna be like one of those fancy TikTokers or the ASM artists where they do their little Hi everybody, we are back from a little break. Wow, and I gotta tell you, that was the right decision. So if you buy one of these bottles, make sure you let it open up, because holy crap, on the nose it has become candy fruit sweetness. It's so weird to me that, 20 minutes ago it smelled like grass, and now it smells legitimately like candied plums, strawberries, kiwi, still get that guava, that pineapple, that mango. It's just an absolute fruit bomb with some cinnamon and sugar sprinkled on top. Wow, honey, cinnamon and honey. Okay, let's taste it. That is so dense. Tons of candy sweetness, tons of fruitiness. You do still get that grassiness in the finish. It definitely has a grain finish. My goodness, I mean, I'm not going to keep filming through this, but I'm wondering what it would taste like after 30 more minutes breathing. Holy crap. Just a lot of like pineapple and peaches. A lot of peaches in the mid palate in particular. Tons of fruit notes. And it's sweet. It's got that thick, almost like fruit syrup. Like if you take strawberries and you boil them down and they concentrate, it's got like that kind of note. This is one of the most complex pours I've ever tried. Just in the number of different fruits and the way they present and the journey the pour takes you on. Super fruit syrupy sweet up front. Mid palate is all the fruit notes, and they feel like fresh fruits. They don't feel like candied fruits as much as they do up front. It gets candy fruit up front, then like natural real fruit in the mid palate, transition into an almost nuttiness, and then finishes kind of grassy. And now, after letting it breathe a little bit longer, I'm getting like a peppery finish after the grassy. So if you don't like that grassy note, it becomes a smaller and smaller portion of the tasting, which is really cool. And this is a whiskey that really benefits from that Kentucky chew. Sloshing it around, opening your mouth, really letting it coat the entirety of the inside of your mouth brings out so many more new flavors. I'm just blown away by this. Bottle is $500 MSRP. I think you can get it for $500 in a lot of places. I think I'm going to get one of these. This is going to be my housewarming present to myself. That's how good it is. I may not be as like demonstrative as I was with the William LaRue Weller 2019. The William LaRue Weller 2019 was one of the best pours I've ever had as well. But it was not as exquisite to me as this one. It was very tasty. I really enjoyed the flavors, but this feels like, I don't know, like some sort of delicate journey, or like something that needs to be put up on a pedestal. It's hard for me to describe it. There's just so much happening. It's so beautiful. The complexity. This is the most complex whiskey I've ever tasted. Most complex whiskey I've ever tasted. And sometimes you don't want that, and sometimes you want that. And I think the William LaRue Weller was very delicious. It was very like classic, like this is the perfect bourbon. But it wasn't particularly complex. And that's something that's often a mark against bourbons. This is incredibly complex and still very delicious. It gives me so much fruit and sweetness. So bourbon lovers, I think you will still like this. Just absolutely phenomenal. Let's finish this off and give it final thoughts. Yeah, on the whole, it's really hard for me to recommend paying a lot of money for whiskey, but if there was ever a whiskey worth $500, it would be this one. This thing is just lovely. It's complex, it's nuanced, it's got 100 different notes in it, and every sip is a new journey. So you could sit there, if you pour 2 ounces of this, you could sit there and sip it for hours, literally, and just every little nip get totally new notes. Every bigger nip sloshed around your mouth and just get 5 or 6 new notes. It is an absolute journey. It's an absolute delight. I will be buying a bottle of this. Incredible stuff. So thank you so much, Akeem the Dream, for sharing this with me. It was delicious when I first tried it, and after giving it a little bit of time, it's delicious now. I guess this for me is like a Lamborghini or a McLaren or some sort of like hypercar. One of those cars that you pay $3 million for, and you have to keep it in perfect shape. It's such a finely tuned machine, all the subtlety and nuance that goes into it, and it has to be treated a very specific way. If you just drive this thing on the road, it's going to break down. It's not going to work, which is what I had at the beginning of this video. But I would say don't have it as your first pour of the day. And I would say make sure that you let it breathe for at least 30 minutes. And if you do those things and you sit down with a pour like this, you're going to have a ride of a lifetime. You guys keep drinking like professionals. Please subscribe. Please join my Patreon. Cheers. Oh, my glass is empty. Well, I guess I'll just have to do it out of the bottle then.